Caelis Aether was a world where emotion was forbidden. No love, no tears, no memory. But one drop of elixir, one accidental moment, awakened a princess born to stay silent and taught an entire civilization how to feel again. They didn't start with a revolution. They started with a smile, a touch, and finally a kiss that shattered 1,000 years of silence. This isn't a story about love. It's a story about choice, the choice to feel even when it hurts. We begin beneath a violet sky so still it feels like a painting pretending to breathe. Glass towers rise like quiet hymns, humming with a soft pulse of artificial wind and emotionless order. No one here shouts, no one cries, no one kisses. This is Caelis Aether, crown jewel of the Elixir Alliance, where feelings are not just frowned upon but surgically extracted from blood and law. Dr. Orion Vale steps off the Earth delegation skimmer with a lopsided smile and absolutely no clue how much trouble his heart is about to cause. A neuro-engineer from Earth with 2 PhDs and an allergy to silence, he lands on Caelis with a datapad in one hand and curiosity leaking out the other. The welcome committee awaits. Dozens of Elixir officials stand in absolute formation. Robes the color of thoughtlessness, faces smoothed by genetic filters, eyes as still as stars that died before Earth even learned how to dream. Then she appears. Princess Elyssa'tar. She moves like logic sculpted her. Every step is measured. Every blink is slow and symmetrical. Skin pale lilac brushed with silver tones. Hair gleaming white and braided in geometric precision. Her eyes, though, are voids too deep to be mirrors. "Welcome, Earth Representative Orion Vale," she says with perfect pronunciation. Her voice is pleasant. A little too pleasant. Like someone optimized it for calm hostage negotiation. Orion scratches behind his ear. "You can just call me Orion. The whole representative thing makes me feel like a dental product." A pause, then with no smile at all, she replies, "Your discomfort is noted." He grins. "Well, I feel seen. That's something." They walk side by side through the plaza of measured intent. It is full of things that sparkle without joy. Fountains with light instead of water. Statues depicting emotional equilibrium that all resemble someone trying not to sneeze during a funeral. Elisa explains the rules with the passion of a spreadsheet. "You are assigned to Quadrant 6. Morning sessions begin at Cycle 21. Please refrain from physical gestures exceeding 32 degrees of limb variance. They disrupt neural coherence among unshielded observers." "No jazz hands," Orion mutters. "Got it." She tilts her head slightly like a machine trying to solve sarcasm. "Jazz hands, never mind," he says. Too much culture, too fast. They reach the dignitary arcology, which looks like a spaceship lost a staring contest with a cathedral. Inside his room is white round, clinically perfect. The scent of sterilized ambition lingers in the air. That night at the diplomatic banquet, things get worse. Orion sits between a historian who communicates through pulse jewelry and a taste moderator who insists on analyzing the emotional undertones of mashed root. Everyone eats in silence, then nods. Emotionally neutral music plays in the background. It sounds like a robot practicing apologies. Elisa remains at the head table, unmoving, unsmiling, but watching. Specifically, she watches Orion. Not obviously, just long enough for him to notice, and just short enough for him to wonder if he imagined it. Later in his room, Orion records a private message. Day 1. Caelis Aether is gorgeous and unsettling. Imagine if IKEA became a religion. Everyone is nice in that terrifyingly polite way serial killers are described by neighbors. I think the princess looked at me for more than 3 seconds. That probably counts as an emotional incident here. The next morning in Lab Sector 12, he sees her again. She is already there, of course, reading his research logs. The lab is sleek and circular, glowing gently at the edges. In the center rests his prototype, a small vial of shimmering fluid locked in a containment cradle. "You call this the Elixir," she says. "It reconfigures neural pathways through emotion permission biochemistry." He nods. "Basically, it teaches the brain how to feel again, safely, thoughtfully, like training wheels for joy." Why would anyone want that? Her tone is not mocking. It is genuinely puzzling. Because life is not supposed to feel like a well-organized spreadsheet. She blinks. We eliminated emotional chaos 4,000 years ago. It brought only destruction? Maybe. Or maybe you just buried the pain so deep you forgot the beauty that came with it. She does not respond, but she picks up the vial, turn it slowly in her hands. For a moment she looks like someone remembering a song they were never taught. Then the lights flicker. A tremor runs through the lab. The containment field pulses just once. A click, a hiss, and the vial slips from her fingers. It strikes the floor, shatters. Mist blooms around them. Soft, invisible, powerful. Orion coughs. That's not ideal. Elissa stumbles back. Her pupils dilate. She grips the edge of the table. Her breathing changes. Faster, less controlled. I feel... Her voice cracks. Heat, pulse acceleration, inconsistent mental cohesion. This is a malfunction. No, Orion says quietly. That's emotion. She turns toward him. Her face is not blank anymore. It is confusing, vulnerable, real. What have you done? Before he can answer, the ceiling buzzes. Sirens blare deep and hollow like morning bells echoing through a canyon. The doors slam open. Guards pour in, weapons drawn. Not bullets. These are dampeners. Devices designed to cancel neural surges. The lead warden stares at Orion, then Elissa, then the shattered vial. Elissa raises one trembling hand. The elixir has entered my system. I have violated the sanctity of suppression. Her eyes lock with Orion's. Under the ancient law, the emotion clause, we are now bound. He blinks. Wait, what? It means, she says, still breathless. You are now my emotional partner. Legally. Permanently. Okay, Orion mutters. So we're married. In the most emotionally repressed way possible, and still somewhere beneath all the alarms and protocols he cannot help noticing, she is blushing. Orion had imagined a lot of things in his life. Being accidentally engaged to a royal alien scientist because of a bio-serum mishap was not on that list, and yet there he was standing beside Princess Elyssa'tar while the guards fanned out like emotionless statues with stun lances. Elissa's voice was calm, but beneath it trembled something that even the emotionless Elixir guards could not ignore. Her pupils remained dilated, and her fingers twitched slightly at her sides. A micro-expression, tiny, but on Caelis Aether it was practically a scandal. The emotion clause is clear, she stated. When a member of the nobility forms an unregulated emotional imprint, the source must be contained and bonded. For public safety. One of the guards stepped forward. Karn Valix. His face was blank, but his voice was cool iron. Do you confirm the imprint? Elissa hesitated. Just long enough for the tension in the room to crack like overpressurized glass. I do, she said. The emotional imprint is verified. Orion tried to raise his hand in protest. Now hold on, I was just showing her a sample. I didn't mean to emotionally imprint anything. It is irrelevant, Karn replied. The law is ancient. Intent does not alter consequence, Great Orion muttered. Love without consent. Classic alien courtship. He was escorted back to the arcology with two guards flanking him like matching emotionless gargoyles. Elissa walked just ahead, her back stiff, her head held high, but her steps less precise than before. She stumbled once on the stairs. A soft gasp escaped her lips. Not pain. Surprise. Orion leaned forward. Are you okay? I am experiencing vertigo, she answered. It appears linked to a fluctuation in emotional latency. Translation feelings make you dizzy. I believe I just felt embarrassment. He grinned. Welcome to the human condition. It only gets worse. That night they were assigned a joint observation suite in the diplomatic cohesion wing. The room had 2 beds spaced 3 meters apart. A mutual plant in the center blinked softly with emotion-regulating biolight. Orion looked at the blinking plant, then at her. Is that thing going to tattle if we get too excited? It monitors atmospheric emotional density, Elissa replied. If our interaction exceeds 75 microhertz, it will notify the sanctum. 75 microhertz. That's barely enough for a cuddle. I do not know what a cuddle is, she said. But it sounds inefficient. He laughed, and that laughter, it echoed strangely. Elisa's head tilted. Her pupils fluttered. She pressed a hand to her chest. What? Was that the sound that was me finding all this completely ridiculous? You'll get used to it. She stared at him. It made something shift inside. I think I enjoyed the sound. Well, careful. Next comes joy, then humor, and before you know it, you'll be dancing in your kitchen with a spoon. She blinked slowly. Dancing? With kitchen utensils? He leaned back. Forget I said anything. Later that night, he caught her sitting near the window. Caelis's sky shimmered with solar flares, bending across the dome. Her posture was slouched. Just slightly, but enough to break protocol. You're slouching, he teased. She straightened immediately. Apologies. I must recalibrate. No, it's good, he said. Means your muscles are catching up with your feelings. She turned toward him, her voice lower now. This is not how I expected the cycle to proceed. I was meant to oversee the neurosymmetry trials. Now I am bonded, experiencing things. He sat beside her close enough for the plant to blink yellow. What kind of things? I felt warmth. When you laughed. My thoughts did not remain linear. My heartbeat reacted. That's called being flustered. It is. Inefficient, but also kind of wonderful. Silence. Then a whisper. It hurts, but also not. He leaned in careful. Feelings are like that. Sharp and soft at once. She nodded. Just once. And somewhere across the room, the plant blinked orange. The next morning, the Emotion Sanctum issued a formal evaluation order. Karn Valix was assigned as their full-time observation officer. He arrived with 2 scanning drones and a thermal monitor that glowed red as soon as Orion entered the room. Karn's face was still blank, but something flickered in his voice. Princess, your cortical readings suggest significant deviation. Elyssa replied, steady as she could. Deviation does not mean damage. It means risk. To whom, she asked. To your systems or to your beliefs? Orion's eyebrows shot up. Was that sass? She glanced at him, just briefly. Possibly. Karn stepped forward. You are to be transferred to the Sanctum Observation Hall. Immediately. Elyssa took a breath. It shook. Just slightly. Is that necessary? Your bond must be monitored, he replied. Orion folded his arms. And if we refuse, Karn did not answer. Instead, he stared at the orange glowing plant in the room. Later on the way to the sanctum, Elyssa whispered to Orion as they walked. This law, the emotion clause, it was designed to contain danger, but it never defined love, only risk. That's usually how it starts, Orion said. They regulate what they're afraid of. She looked at him. Her expression was not blank anymore. It was searching. Then why did you bring the elixir here? I didn't bring it for this, he replied. But maybe this is what it was always meant for. Behind them, Karn hesitated before following. A muscle in his jaw flickered. He said nothing, but he touched his chest once, as if something old and long buried had stirred. And above them, the sanctum's towers gleamed like a motionless watchman, unaware that something was already cracking underneath. The emotion sanctum did not look like a prison, at least not in the obvious way. It was made of curved white stone, translucent walls, and gardens that hummed with regulated serenity. Every flower was bio-engineered to release calming pheromones. Every bench was measured to discourage long conversations. The place was built not to hold people, but to give a smoother feeling. Princess Elyssa'tar sat in the evaluation chamber with her hands folded neatly in her lap. Her skin shimmered faintly under the soft light, but something in her posture had changed. It was no longer robotic. It was deliberate, human almost. Dr. Orion Vale sat beside her. He fidgeted, clicked his pen, adjusted his jacket. He had been given a sterile white tunic to wear. It itched in places he did not know existed. A panel slid open with a hiss. 3 Elixir officials entered, each wearing identical robes and emotion blockers on their temples. In the center stood Patriarch Zelkor, head of the sanctum and high arbiter of emotional governance. His face was carved from stone, and his gaze seemed to strip hope from air itself. You have violated Clause 6, Zelkor said without preamble. Princess Elyssa'tar has consumed an illegal neural stimulant. You Earthborn are the source. Orion cleared his throat. To be fair, she kinda grabbed it before the tremor. It was an accident. Zelkor's gaze did not flicker. Intent is irrelevant. Consequence is law. Alyssa's voice cut through the chamber. I am not damaged. You are altered, the patriarch replied. That is enough, I feel, she said. And it has not killed me. It has expanded me. The room fell still. Even the guards at the edges blinked a gesture usually trained out of them by age 5. Zelkor turned to her. You are the heir to the throne of silence. You were born to suppress what your ancestors once feared. Then perhaps my ancestors were wrong. Orion blinked. That sentence alone could be considered sedition on Caelis. Zelkor's jaw twitched. Just once. Your emotional bond must be severed. She will die, Orion said. Her system has already started realignment. If you try to erase the link now, it could collapse her neural matrix. She is Elixir, Zelkor snapped. She will endure. No, Alyssa said quietly. I will not go back. Silence. Then Karn Valak stepped forward from the shadows. His presence was constant these days. Quiet, watchful. His voice was lower than usual. There is another option. Zelkor narrowed his eyes. You speak out of turn. She should be allowed to relocate to the Sentience Reserve for containment and study. That is a reformist stronghold, Zelkor said sharply. It is also our last functioning deep genome laboratory, Karn replied, and the only facility equipped to monitor emotional variance long-term. Orion frowned. That sounds suspiciously like agreeing with me. Karn did not smile, but his voice just barely had texture. It is also the only place we will not lose her completely. The council deliberated. 3 minutes of absolute silence passed. Even the air seemed to wait. Finally, Zelkor spoke. Very well. Princess Elyssa'tar will be escorted to the Northern Sentience Reserve. You Earthborn will accompany her as required by the clause. But understand this. Any further deviation from protocol, and both of you, will be nullified. Orion raised a hand. Quick question. Nullified means... Elyssa answered very softly. Death. Or worse. Karn did not correct her. They were transported in a hover shuttle shaped like a folded petal. Elyssa stared out at the shifting terrain. Mountains curved like thought patterns. Rivers glowed with bioluminescent programming. But her reflection in the window looked unfamiliar to her now. My skin, she murmured. It is warmer. My muscles respond faster. My breath pattern has changed. That's your body catching up to your mind, Orion said. It's called being alive. I was alive before. No, he said gently. You were efficient. There's a difference. She turned toward him. Is it always this loud inside? What's your thoughts? My feelings. He nodded. Yes. And no, it gets quieter. But never be silent. For a while they sat in companionable stillness. Then Alyssa whispered, I had a dream last night. Orion blinked. You dream now? She nodded. I saw a door. Behind it was music. I do not know how I knew it was music, but it called to me. You think it means something? I think it means I want to open it. They arrived at the reserve at dusk. It was hidden inside a cliff face surrounded by memory-resistant flora, a reformist safe zone cloaked in mystery and stories about people who felt too much and disappeared. Seller even met them at the entrance. Shorter than Alyssa, with hair that shimmered blue-black and eyes that always seemed to laugh even when her mouth did not. Well, she said you finally broke protocol. Took you long enough, Elyssa blinked. You knew this would happen, I hope, Seller even said. I also lost 10 credits in the pool. I thought you'd punch a guard before kissing a foreigner. Orion coughed. Whoa, who said anything about kissing? Selarivan grinned. We all saw the broadcast, her pupils dilated. Yours too. You're basically married in 3 cultures. Alyssa looked flustered again. She touched her fingers together. I do not fully understand the implications, but I do not regret them. Selarivan's expression softened. Come on, let's get you scanned before you explode into poetry. They entered the reserve. Its halls were carved into stone, lined with vines that glowed softly in the dark. The walls pulsed with quiet tech. And behind the central chamber, Alyssa's heart beat faster. Somewhere deeper inside a machine had just begun to hum, as if it had been waiting. The central chamber of the Northern Sentience Reserve felt alive in a way that unnerved Orion. The walls were lined with bioluminescent filaments that pulsed in time with visitors' biosignatures. Every step echoed not because of architecture, but because the building itself listened, or at least pretended to. Alyssa stood at the scanning platform, arms relaxed but eyes sharp. Her skin glowed faintly violet in the scanner's light, and the petals of her collar shimmered as the system calibrated around her. Silarivan watched from a terminal nearby, fingers dancing across a console woven from living vine fiber. "Vitals stable," Silarivan said, "but emotional flux is increasing." Elisa blinked slowly. "I am not in distress." "No," Silarivan replied. "You're in bloom." The word hung in the air. Elisa looked at Orion, a flicker of something in her gaze. A question, maybe, or a challenge. "The genetic report is ready," Silarivan said. She turned the screen toward them. It displayed a twisting sequence of Elisari genome strands overlaid with glowing patches. "Here's the fun part. That elixir of yours, Orion, didn't just trigger latent emotion. It reactivated something long thought extinct." Orion leaned in. "Let me guess." "Love worse," Silarivan said with a smile. "Choice." Alyssa stared at the screen. "Explain." "You come from a lineage that was altered," Silarivan said. "Your entire noble class was genetically filtered over generations to remove the capacity for emotional attachment. Not just suppressed, removed." "That is not possible," Alyssa whispered. "The suppression was surgical, implant-based." "No," Orion said, voice quiet. "Your implants were the leash. The genetic rewriting was the collar." Silarivan pointed to a highlighted strand. "See the sequence? It's old, buried under generations of engineered stability, but the elixir reactivated it, like a fire waking up from a 1,000-year nap." Elisa touched the edge of the console. "So, I was never meant to feel." "Not by their design," Silarivan replied, "but by your own biology. You were always capable." Orion looked at her. "That means your feelings are not artificial. They're natural. Yours." Elissa's voice dropped to a whisper. "They lied." Orion stepped closer. "They did. And now you get to decide what to do with the truth." She did not answer, but her hand found his. Lightly, not officially, just enough for the plant near the scanner to flash a soft amber. Silarivan cleared her throat. "Well, if we're done being adorable, there's something else." She led them into a deeper wing of the reserve, a sealed chamber lined with security glyphs and locked under a memory veil. Inside was a single terminal, ancient, untouched. "The mind archive," Silarivan said, "sealed since before the silence laws." Elissa stepped toward it. "What is inside everything?" Silarivan replied. "Records from before emotion were criminalized. Thought patterns, art, songs, stories, the last memory logs of the old sentience." Orion whistled. That would have made one heck of a YouTube channel. Silarivan touched the interface. The room darkened. The terminal lit up. A voice filled the chamber, crackly warm, unfiltered. "To feel is not to fall. It is to fly with risk." Elissa inhaled sharply. The terminal continued. "In suppressing pain, we silence joy. In avoiding chaos, we erase choice. This was our mistake. May the future remember." A video fragment played. An Elisari elder, long before gene filters, weeping beside a newborn. Laughter in the background, hands touching in affection. A public square filled with dancing, clumsy and beautiful. Orion looked at Alyssa. Her face had changed. Not in form, in energy. She was no longer the perfect mask of royalty. She was someone waking up. "They took this from us," she said. "They feared it," Silarivan corrected. "And fear makes cowards of rulers." Karn Valix entered the chamber. His arrival was silent, but his presence was heavy. "You were followed?" Silarivan asked sharply. Karn shook his head. "No, but I had to see." He looked at the screen. In the image of joy, lost and almost forgotten. For a moment something broke in his expression. "Just a crack." "My sister," he said. "She used to sing, before her purge, before they took her voice." Elissa turned to him. "You remember only fragments," Karn said. "But I remember the silence afterward even more." Orion stepped forward. "You don't have to keep obeying them. I know, Karn replied. That's why I came. Seller even nodded. Then you need to help us do what comes next. Elissa looked at them all, on the screen, at Orion. She breathed deeply. Then it is time we returned. Not to ask, to show them what they buried. She turned away from the archive. Every step now held weight. She was not just walking, she was leading. Orion followed, pulse quickened, unsure whether they were stepping into revolution or a very public breakdown. But he knew one thing. She had chosen to feel, and nothing on Caelis Aether would be the same again. The shuttle ride back to the capital was not quiet, and not because anyone spoke. Elisa sat rigid in her seat, but her expression betrayed the storm behind her eyes. Orion sat across from her, watching the light from the sky pulse filters dance across her skin. Every flicker seemed to mirror something walking inside her. He wanted to say something comforting, but what could you offer someone who just learned their soul had been locked in a cage for thousands of years? You do not need to stare, she said without looking at him. You're glowing, he replied. That is a physiological reaction, she muttered. Not symbolic. He leaned forward slightly. Still, kind of beautiful. She finally turned toward him. Do all humans flirt during revolutions? Pretty much, he said with a grin. It's how we survive the awkward parts. Elissa tried to keep her mouth still, but the corners of her lips fought her. It wasn't quite a smile, but it was a step toward one. Karn sat at the rear of the cabin, silent. He had not spoken since they left the reserve. His weapon rested across his knees, powered down, but accessible. His eyes were distant, focused inward, as if he were still trying to sort through memories that should not exist. I do not trust him, Elissa whispered. Orion glanced at the former warden. Honestly, I think he doesn't trust himself either. The capital loomed ahead, gleaming towers, ordered light paths, no chaos, no noise. A civilization built like a library, where even the wind respected silence. They landed at the lower platform of the emotion sanctum. Elissa exited first. No royal guard flanked her this time. Just Karn behind and Orion to her left. Eyes followed them as they walked the central corridor. Emotion sensors blinked softly as Elissa passed, registering subtle tremors in her vitals. Behind every wall, officials were already alerting the council. Inside the grand chamber, Patriarch Zelkor stood beside the obsidian lectern. He looked unchanged. But even Orion could see the tension beneath the surface now. It was like watching an iceberg sweat. You return uninvited, the Patriarch said. I return unafraid, Elissa replied. Her voice did not shake. Zelkor gestured and holograms filled the air. Graphs, neural data, legal texts, proof of her deviation, of her bond, of everything they had prepared to use against her. You bring corruption into our sanctum, he said. You bring chaos wrapped in sentiment. Elissa stepped forward. I bring the truth. And a question. The room fell still. What is the value of perfection, she asked, if it is purchased by erasing what makes us alive? Zelkor narrowed his eyes. Emotion breeds violence. Attachment breeds war. We survive by removing the variables that destroyed our ancestors. Then show us, she challenged. Show the council what was a rust. She turned to Karn. He hesitated, then stepped forward. He placed a small device on the central console. A projection burst to life the ancient archive from the reserve. The chamber filled with color and movement. Joy, grief, music, a child laughing, a couple holding hands. The data pulsed with memory. Gasps echoed from the perimeter. Some officials blinked rapidly. One dropped her stylus. This is forbidden, Zelkor barked. It is true, Karn said, and you cannot suppress it any longer. Elissa's voice rose. I was engineered to be empty, but I am not. And now I stand here not broken, not wild, but free. Zelkor's face remained stone. Your emotions are a virus. No, Orion said. They're a cure. The council began to murmur. Not in anger, in doubt. Silarivan entered the chamber without waiting for permission. She wore no official robes, only the mark of the reformists on her shoulder. Counselors, she said. You've seen the records. You've seen the transformation. You know what's coming. And what is that, Zelkor asked coldly. Silarivan smiled. Choice. He turned toward Elissa. You wish to unravel centuries of balance for what the chaos of personal desire. Elisa walked toward him slowly. Her voice softened. I wish to remind our people that feeling is not the enemy. It is the beginning. Without it, we are machines pretending to be wise. Zelkor raised a hand. Enough. But Elissa did not stop. She stepped closer. Then, to the shock of every observer, she reached for Orion's hand. He froze. His heart thudded like a war drum in his ears. She turned to the council. Her voice was low but clear. You taught me to repress. You demanded silence. But I choose to feel. And then, in front of the most emotionless ruling body in the galaxy, Elissa kissed him. Not long, not theatrical, but real, defiant, soft and electric at once. The emotion sensors in the walls exploded into color. Lights flashed red, orange, violet. Monitors shrieked with readings off the charts. No one moved, except Karn, who whispered under his breath, "It begins." Elissa pulled back. Her cheeks were flushed, her breath uneven. But her eyes, they blazed. I am Elyssa'tar, and I am not afraid of myself. Orion just stood there stunned. Someone in the council dropped a datapad. 1,000 years of silence had just been broken with one kiss. The chamber did not explode in noise. Instead, it cracked in silence. Illusory reactions were measured but not emotionless anymore. A subtle shift in posture, a widening of eyes, the brief tremble of a hand that had forgotten how to feel. Princess Elyssa'tar had just kissed a human in full view of the ruling council. The shock radiates like heat off a frozen lake struck by sunlight. Orion stood beside her, still reeling. His brain had gone very quiet, letting the hum of his heartbeat speak for everything else. He was not entirely sure what had just happened, only that it was irreversible. Patriarch Zelkor raised one hand. His fingers were stiff. His face, as always, was unreadable. But something about his stance had lost its absolute symmetry. This act, he said, is a direct violation of the Sanctum's highest codex. You have brought uncontrolled emotional activity into a secure governance environment. Elissa stood straighter. Her eyes were bright now, not glassy. I brought truth into a room built on lies. Solarivan, standing just behind the central line of guards, smiled faintly. And she brought ratings. The outer sectors are already awake. They saw it. The kiss. One of the junior counselors spoke up, her voice unsteady. We are receiving overflow. Emotion markers from the citizenry are rising. A public reaction has begun. Multiple reports of touch, voluntary displays of affection. Some are calling it the Echo. The Echo. Orion blinked. Sounds like a band name. Elissa did not smile, but her voice warmed. A ripple of feeling. I suppose that is exactly what it is. Zelkor turned slowly, addressing the full chamber. If we allow this to spread, we unravel the architecture of our order. Entire sectors built on neural regulation will fracture. Protocol must be enforced. Solarivan took a step forward. So your answer is mass suppression, erase everyone who dares to feel again. It would not be the first time, Zelkor replied. Our ancestors once faced the same threshold. They chose survival over sensation. They chose fear. Elissa answered, calm but firm. And in doing so, they became less than what they were meant to be. Karn Valak stepped forward. His armor hissed slightly with the movement, a reminder that he had once been an enforcer of silence. But his weapon remained holstered. His voice was soft. Protocol Prime cannot be enacted, not anymore. Zelkor turned to him. You are a warden, bound to the code. I was, Karn replied. Now I am something else. He walked slowly to the center of the chamber. I remember my sister's voice. She used to sing before the purge. The sound was soft, uneven, and real. It was erased. Along with her laughter, her questions, her ability to be more than a function. Today I saw that same spark in Elissa. I saw the choice return. Silence fell. But this time it was not the emptiness of control. It was the quiet that precedes a decision. Elissa stepped beside him. You say that chaos comes with emotion, that our people cannot handle the disorder of feeling. But I say we were built to feel, designed for wonder, not just for obedience. Zelkor raised his voice slightly, the only indication of rising anger. And what if the chaos consumes us again? What if love leads to conflict and tears lead to ruin? Then let it, Orion said. Because what's the point of surviving without knowing what it means to live? Solarivan looked at the council. People are already changing. You cannot stop them, but you can join them or be left behind. The chamber lights flickered, not from power loss, but from a systemic reaction. The emotion sensors in the room were overwhelmed. Readings blinked crimson, amber, and gold. A guard near the back lowered his head and removed his inhibitor chip. Another followed, then another. Elyssa turned toward the central broadcast console. Send the archive to the public. Zelkor stepped forward. If you do that, she met his eyes. Then everyone will remember. Karn activated the console. The walls lit up with ancient memories, songs, stories, laughter. Moments of grief and triumph encoded in color and voice. The entire network of Caelis Aether received it at once. In the plaza beyond the sanctum, people paused. Some wept. Some touched each other's hands. A few simply closed their eyes and breathed for the first time without suppression. Zelkor said nothing. His face did not change, but the council did not stand with him. Elyssa reached for Orion's hand again. This time she held it openly. I am no longer just a princess, she said. I am at the beginning. And as they stepped out into the light of the plaza, the people of Caelis Aether looked up. They did not kneel. They smiled. The plaza outside the sanctum was no longer still. The citizens of Caelis Aether, once the most disciplined and expressionless population in the quadrant, stood clustered in hushed waves. Some held hands unsure of what the gesture meant, but unwilling to let go. A few wept openly. Others touched their own faces, confused by the tears they had never learned to name. Elyssa'tar stood on the marble platform in full view of her people. Her silver-trimmed robe shifted in the wind, now unfastened at the collar. A tiny act of rebellion. Her breath steamed softly in the evening air. She looked out over the crowd, not with authority, but with awe. Orion moved beside her. He scanned the sea of faces and whispered, "They're not running. That's a good sign." "They do not know how," Elyssa replied. "We never taught fear, only control." Behind them, Karn Valix kept a steady watch on the perimeter. His stance remained strong, but no longer aggressive. He had become something else entirely. A sentinel, yes, but now in service of something worth protecting. Solarivan stood at the rear of the platform with a portable terminal. Her fingers moved quickly, sending the archive to every node on the planet. "It's done," she said. "The memory cache is out. Every citizen will know the truth before the sun rises." Elyssa exhaled. "Then we cannot return to what we were." No, Solarivan agreed. "But maybe now we can become something better." The first child to speak did so without hesitation. A boy no older than 10 stepped forward from the crowd, holding up a drawing of shaky lines and uneven colors. It showed Elyssa standing in front of a red sun, holding hands with a human. Elyssa knelt to receive it. The boy said, "My father said it's dangerous to feel, but I think it's beautiful." She touched the paper. "It is." Whispers began spreading across the plaza. Someone played music through a pocket node. It sounded old, filled with broken chords and joy. A melody not written by regulation. Karn surveyed the crowd. "No one's dispersing." "They're waiting," Orion said. "For what?" "For her to show them what comes next." Elyssa stood again and addressed the crowd, not with amplification, but with her own voice. It was carried in the still air. "For generations we were told emotions would unmake us, that our ancestors fell because they felt too deeply. We were taught to fear the very thing that connects us. But today I felt sorrow. I felt joy. I felt love." She paused. The words hung heavy, and I did not fall. I stood. Applause was not common on Caelis Aether, but it began anyway, awkward, scattered. A ripple of slapping hands that grew into a wave. The kind of sound the plaza had never heard. Not in living memory. A light rain began to fall, gentle and fragrant. It smelled like the ancient memory flowers kept in the deepest gardens. Orion tilted his head back. "Do you think it's symbolic?" he asked. Solarivan smiled. Caelis reigns when something changes. The council remained within the sanctum, their silence now deafening. Zelkor had vanished, leaving behind nothing but unanswered orders and a legacy already fading. Karn stepped down from the platform and approached a group of children forming a circle. One looked up at him wide-eyed. "Are you a warden?" she asked. "I used to be." "What are you now?" he considered. "Learning." In a quiet corner of the plaza, an elderly woman removed her inhibitor chip and stared at it for a long time before handing it to her daughter. "Keep it," she said, "but not to wear, to remember." Later, as night wrapped the city in soft shadows, Elissa and Orion walked through the garden pathways once built to suppress thought. Now they seemed to breathe along with them. She turned to him. "When I kissed you, I felt as if I were opening a door I had always feared." "And what was on the other side?" he asked. "Everything," Orion chuckled. "You sure know how to pick moments. I had help." They paused beside one of the emotion trees, its leaves pulsing with pale blue light. Elissa reached out and pressed her palm to the bark. "It feels alive." "It is," Orion replied. "Like you." Her fingers slipped into his. No fanfare. No speeches. Just contact me. Behind them, the city stirred differently now. More voices. Fewer scripts. Windows opened. Music rose. Lights blinked with no synchronized command. A new rhythm had begun. Uneven. Honest. Humans. An alien too, but now with the beating heart of both. The Mind Archive library no longer felt forbidden. The walls once designed to absorb sound and suppress reaction now echoed faintly with the quiet movements of those reclaiming what had been lost. Elyssa'tar sat on the floor with her legs folded beneath her, surrounded by open memory scrolls and crystalline dataspheres. Her fingers moved slowly across the surface of a restored thought cube, activating scenes and voices from before the Silence Doctrine. Orion watched her from a nearby cushion. He held a book in his lap, a real book bound in leather-like material, handwritten with curved Elixir symbols. The page he read described something called empathic resonance. He turned it carefully, the edges delicate but alive with meaning. "Did you know your people once celebrated a season called the Bloom of Listening?" he asked. Elissa looked up. "I remember the term from history lessons. I never knew what it meant." Orion grinned. "Apparently it was a time when everyone was encouraged to speak their truths and others had to listen without interruption. For 10 days, no corrections, just honesty." Elissa touched her temple, thinking. Such a practice would be considered dangerous under the old code. "Exactly," he said. "And yet here we are breaking rules with every breath." Celerivan entered the chamber with purpose in her stride. Her usual sharp tone had softened, replaced by the voice of someone who had found something she thought lost. "The responses keep coming in," she said, holding up a display. "Whole districts are hosting gatherings, unprogrammed conversations, poetry sessions. Some even call it a revival." Elissa stood. Her presence had changed. No longer regal in the distant sense, but grounded, like someone whose crown now came from within. "And the council?" she asked. Celerivan nodded. 5 have resigned. 2 declared intent to support the transition. The rest remained silent. Karn entered behind her, his armor replaced with simple robes. His expression, as always, was restrained, but the tightness in his shoulders had relaxed. He no longer looked like someone bracing for a command. He looked like someone waiting for a beginning. "Zelquar has not appeared," he said. "His personal quarters are sealed. No one has responded to internal communication requests." Elissa nodded once. "Let him rest. His age belongs to the past." Celerivan activated a projection above the central archive table. It displayed the world of Caelis Aether lit with spreading zones of light. Each light represented a new emotional signal. Every district that began feeling again was another pulse in the awakening. "The people are adapting," she said. "Even those afraid of it. They are not running." "They have nowhere to run," Elissa replied. "Only forward." Karn stepped beside her. "And the elixir?" "We will no longer manufacture it," she said. "It is no longer needed. Choice must be organic." Orion looked toward her. "So what now?" Elissa turned slowly, her eyes steady. "Now we share the archive, not as a weapon, as a window." Together they descended into the heart of the library, into the oldest chamber. At its center was the core memory sphere, a construct older than the silence code. 1,000 voices whispered inside it, recorded by ancestors who feared their truths would be erased. Elissa placed her palm on the surface. The sphere responded with a glow swirling with fragments of emotion. Laughter, cries, soft singing, arguments, a heartbeat. Orion joined her. This is the raw form, before rules, before control. Solarivan added, we can transmit it to the sentience beacons. If the people choose to receive it, they can activate their own response. No forced awakening, Elissa said. No compulsion. Karn watched them for a moment. Then he stepped forward and added his hand to the sphere. The light deepened in color, rich and warm. Then we give them that choice, he said. The process began. Light flowed from the archive outward, first into the city, then to the mountains, the oceanic platforms, and finally to the sky beacons that floated in orbit. Messages arrived instantly. A teacher removed the last speech modulator from her classroom, a pilot singing aloud during flight, a gardener planting memory seeds that respond to touch, not code. In the palace, old paintings were unsealed. Artwork filled with color and pain and joy was hung again. Elissa walked through the restored corridor with Orion beside her. She paused in front of one piece, a depiction of two beings, one Elixir and one alien reaching toward each other across a starlit gulf. Orion tilted his head. That's us, she smiled faintly. Maybe it always was. They continued through the hall, hands brushing. No announcement, no ceremony. Just contact me. That night, Elissa recorded her first public message as head of the Sentience Council. Her voice echoed through the network, calm and resonant. To those afraid of emotion, I understand. To those who long for it, I see you. And to those who feel lost in this transformation, you are not alone. She paused, then added, we are learning together. And so the world turned not in silence, but in song. The shift across Caelis Aether was uneven. Change never spreads in straight lines. Some cities lit up with joy, their streets filled with music and impromptu storytelling gatherings. Others remained still uncertain, choosing silence over transformation. Emotional awakening had not come to every soul at once. Elyssa'tar expected this. Not everyone would leap into feeling as she had. Not everyone would trust it. So the Sentience Council passed its first resolution, emotional autonomy. Each citizen had the right to feel, to not feel, to embrace the archive or walk away from it. No pressure, no punishment, only choice. At the heart of the former emotion sanctum, now renamed the Sentience Center, new halls were built. One was the reflection wing. Their memories could be viewed in private. Visitors were free to engage, react, or turn away. Everything depended on consent. Karn Valak spent hours there more than anyone. Not because of duty, but because of a letter. Orion found him sitting in the far chamber, a folded scroll open in his lap. The handwriting was old, curved with care. The name etched on its edge read, Talira Valix. She wrote this before her removal, Karn said softly. I never saw it until today. It was buried in the archive's sealed memories. Orion sat beside him, knees bent, voice quiet. Want to read it aloud? Karn nodded. To Karn, I know what they told you, that I was broken, that I could not be saved. But I hope one day you will hear my voice in the silence and remember who I was. Remember the orchard near the airwells. You said my singing was too loud. I said it was proof I was alive. Maybe one day you'll understand that loving was never my flaw. It was my fire. Karn looked down at the paper, a single tear leaving a clean line on his cheek. He did not wipe it away. She knew, he whispered. She knew I would come back. You did, Orion said. In time, that's what matters. Above them, the memory sphere in the ceiling displayed slow-moving stars. Somewhere between the lights, a soft recording played. A voice, young female, singing in an uneven, fearless tone. Talira. Karn closed his eyes. In another wing, Elissa met with diplomatic envoys from neighboring systems. The galaxy had taken notice of what happened on Caelis Aether. Not all of it was support. A delegation from the Thalorian Concordance spoke first. Your planet was respected for precision. Now your cities are chaotic. Your citizens are unpredictable. Elissa stood without hesitation. Predictability is not the same as peace. We traded truth for stillness. We no longer choose that. A second envoy asked, can you ensure stability in a society ruled by feeling? No, she said, but we can ensure freedom. The words landed softly but firmly. No room for confusion. The delegates said little more after that, though several requested to visit the memory gardens before departing. Later, Elisa walked through the grand passage of change. Murals lined the walls, now painted freely by children and elders alike. They depicted scenes from the archive alongside new ones, people holding hands, dancing, mourning, and smiling. She paused before one mural in particular. It showed her and Orion standing together in a swirl of golden light surrounded by others, whose faces were just beginning to glow. "You see that?" Orion said, coming up beside her. "That's us. Glowing. Kind of accurate." She glanced sideways. "You're a little too tall in this version. I accept it. My ego needs help." She allowed herself a small smile and then handed him a wrapped object. He unwrapped it slowly. Inside was a curved crystal pulsing faintly. "What is this?" he asked. "A personal record," she said. "Our kiss. The moment that shifted everything. You saved that I wanted to remember. Not because of how it looked, but because of how it changed me." Orion turned the crystal in his hands. It was warm, alive in some quiet way. "Do you regret it?" he asked. "No," she said. "It was the first true thing I ever chose for myself." Outside, the sentience beacons lit the sky. More than towers now, they projected signals across the planet carrying not orders, but invitations. Anyone could connect. Anyone could respond. In one corner of the plaza, Karn stood beneath a memory tree. Children gathered around him, watching as he attached something to the bark, the scroll from his sister. He did not speak, but the message was clear. This was no longer a secret. It was part of the living world. Selarivin approached. "You're becoming quite the storyteller." "I'm not telling stories," Karn said. "I'm just helping people find their own." She smiled. "That's what a storyteller does." And as the night settled over Caelis Aether, the city did not sleep as it once did. Music played, doors stayed open. The silence that once defined them was now only one sound among many. The reform reached its boiling point not in the council chambers, but in the streets. The outer districts of Caelis Aether had always been the most tightly controlled. Their populations were smaller, more isolated, and often relied entirely on neural compliance systems to maintain social structure. When the archive waves reached them, reactions were slow at first. But as the memories spread and conversations began, the truth could no longer be contained. On the 12th day after Alyssa's broadcast, a group of educators in the Karth sector staged the first public emotion demonstration. They did not shout or carry signs. Instead, they gathered in silence, then read lines of ancient Elixir poetry, aloud words that had once been erased from every official database. The footage was shared across the planet. It shook the remaining council loyalists into action. In the early hours of morning, the Emergency Codex Committee attempted to seize the Sentient Center. A dozen suppression drones, supported by a disbanded Sanctum response unit, stormed the gates under direct orders from an anonymous command string. They were not prepared for what they encountered. Karn was the first to intercept them. No longer in armor, he wore only the black sash of the Reformation Guards, a role that had evolved from enforcement to protection. When the drones arrived, he stood without a weapon. His palms were open. "This place is no longer yours to silence," he said. The lead drone aimed a dampening beam at him, but before it could fire, a wave of citizens emerged from the inner court. Men, women, children. Some still wore their emotion regulators. Some had already removed them. All stood side by side, forming a wall of presence. Elissa stepped to the front, her voice clear and steady. "If you strike now, you do not silence me. You silence everyone here. Do you think the world will not feel that the drones hovered? Waiting?" Then one by one, their lights flickered and dimmed. Their override protocols failed. The anonymous command string had been corrupted. Solarivan's voice crackled through the courtyard speakers. "System breach successful," she announced. "Sanctum override disabled." Applause broke out, hesitant at first, then full-bodied. Karn turned back to Elisa. "It's done. They will not try again." "Some might," she replied, "but now they will be seen." Orion approached, slightly breathless. "Did I miss the dramatic standoff? Only the part where you get tackled?" Elissa teased. "Maybe next time," he said, grinning. Solarivan arrived moments later, dusting her hands as if finishing a long, satisfying project. "The last hidden enforcement node was located," she said, "buried beneath the old Sanctum's west wing. We found memory suppression vaults, 23 sealed mines. Elyssa's face shifted. Are they recoverable? We believe so, Solarivan replied. The damage is deep, but not permanent. Begin the process, Elissa said. Carefully, no rush. Let them decide when to awaken. That night, the plaza filled with light, not from artificial programming, but from thousands of handmade lanterns lit in honor of those who had been silenced. Each one carried a name, some known, many only remembered in fragments. Elissa and Orion stood in the center, surrounded by flickering color. Do you remember the first night, Orion asked? You said feelings made you dizzy. They still do, she replied, but now I like the sensation. He leaned toward her, voice soft. And now you lead a planet that used to think emotion was a disease. She reached for his hand. Now we know it is a cure. As the lanterns rose into the sky, drifting slowly upward, one of them caught on the edge of a wind current and spiraled close. Orion reached out, catching it gently. The message inside was simple. Thank you for helping me feel again. He handed it to Elissa. She read it once, then pressed it to her heart. Across the world, a network of lanterns climbed into the atmosphere, carrying messages, names, and moments. Not guided, not forced, chosen. The next morning, a final communication arrived from Zelkor. No threats, only a sentence. Perhaps silence is not strength after all. It was unsigned. Elissa placed the note in the archive, and with that, the last chapter of the old world was closed. The council chamber had become a space of tension, not from conflict, but from anticipation. What had once been a hall of strict commands and blank-faced decisions now held conversations filled with hesitation, hope, and uncertainty. The old robes of the sanctum had been retired. In their place, members wore simple garments of soft color, each thread chosen rather than assigned. At the center of it all stood Elyssa'tar. No longer a figurehead, she was a participant, equal among voices, though her presence still carried weight. Her eyes swept the chamber, meeting each face old and new. There was no podium, no elevated seat, only a circle. Deliberation was now a shared act. Orion watched her from a modest seat near the rear. He kept his hands folded in his lap, resisting the urge to intervene. This was her place, her moment, but his heart pounded like someone about to be called forward in a ceremony he never rehearsed. Solarivan opened the discussion with characteristic clarity. We are not gathered today to finalize a law. We are here to determine if we still need law at all in the form we once knew. The silence doctrine is no longer enforceable. The people have chosen to feel. But how do we guide what comes next? A murmur traveled through the chamber. Not disagreement, but a hum of people leaning in. Elissa stepped forward. She wore no crest, only a pale robe with a small silver weave at the collar, the thread shaped like a spiral. It symbolized unfolding, a story still being told. When I stood in this place before, I was not allowed to speak freely, she began. I was a product of policy, an heir trained to maintain stillness. She looked down just for a second. Then I met someone who smiled at me. Not because he was told to, because he wanted to. A soft breath from Orion. Her gaze found him for the briefest moment. I did not understand that feeling. I was told it would make me weak, that it would ruin my clarity. But when I laughed for the first time, it did not ruin me. It completed me. She paused, letting the silence sit before continuing. We have feared chaos. We called emotion a threat. But it was the absence of emotion that nearly erased our future. She turned toward the chamber with renewed strength. I propose the abolition of the silence doctrine. In its place, I propose the sentience charter. Let each citizen choose their relationship with feeling. Let the archive be public. Let education evolve. Let healing become possible. One of the elder members rose. His hands trembled slightly. You ask us to walk without blinders, to risk pain for the possibility of beauty. Elisa nodded. Yes, we will fall, but we will also rise. The council fell into silence. The vote began. One by one, members touched their panels. The system hummed. Final tallies glowed along the edges of the chamber. Unanimous. The silence doctrine was no more. Outside, the plaza responded before the official announcement reached the screens. Lanterns launched without permission. People danced in small groups, clumsy and full of laughter. A teacher read aloud from a recovered book of songs, while her students clapped without rhythm. Inside, Elisa exhaled deeply. The weight had not left her shoulders, but it had shifted. Now it rested as something she chose to carry. Orion approached slowly. "How do you feel?" "Like I might float," she whispered. "And yet I feel grounded for the first time." He reached out and gently took her hand. There was no crowd now, no dramatic flourish, just connection. She leaned into him. "We are not done." "No," he said, "but now we are free to continue." Karn stood near the chamber's edge, hands clasped behind his back. He had not spoken during the meeting, but his presence had been enough. Now he stepped forward. "I remember my sister's voice," he said. "She used to sing badly, loudly. I told her to stop, but now I wish I had joined her." Solarivan approached. "You still can." He nodded slowly. That evening, Elisa delivered her first official address as leader of the Sentience Council. No scripts, no filters. Her words went out across the stars. "We are not perfect, we never were. But now we are becoming honest. May every heart that chooses to feel do so without shame. May those who are afraid be met with compassion. May memory guide us and choice defines us." The screen faded gently to a new emblem, a hand open to a star, not clutching it, but reaching. And from that moment forward, Caelis Aether belonged not to silence, but to story. The new emblem, a hand reaching toward a star, began to appear across every district of Caelis Aether. It replaced the cold spiral of the old silence code, which once symbolized inward control and the suppression of impulse. Now the open hand welcomed uncertainty, welcomed imperfection. It welcomed life. At the newly renamed Sentience Center, Elissa met with the first cohort of educators. These were citizens who had lived through both the quiet and the awakening. Some wore old robes, others bright fabrics of their choosing. Each had volunteered to become guides, not enforcers. Their mission help others navigate emotion, not regulate it. Elisa stood at the head of the sunlit hall. "We will not mandate feelings," she said. "We will invite understanding. Your task is not to instruct, but to listen." One elder raised his hand. "What if we make mistakes?" "You will," she replied, smiling gently. "And that is what will make this real." Outside, the city continued to evolve. Markets had changed. Music once banned in public spaces is now played in open plazas. Vendors sold emotion-responsive jewelry. Children created chalk murals that changed color based on their laughter. In a quieter part of the city, Karn walked through a community garden that had once been off-limits due to its unpredictable pollen emissions. Now it was full of people. He stopped near a small boy sitting alone beside a luminous plant. "You okay?" Karn asked. The boy shrugged. "I cried today. They said it was fine, but I don't know what to do with it now." Karn knelt beside him. "You don't have to do anything with it. You just let it be." The boy looked up. "Even if it comes back tomorrow." "Especially then," Karn replied. Elsewhere, Orion stood on a balcony beside Elissa, watching a line of dancers move across the plaza below. Their steps were not synchronized. They stumbled, laughed, picked each other up. No rhythm, Orion noted. But so much joy, Elissa said. They leaned into each other, foreheads touching. There were no guards watching, no protocols, just the hush of dusk and the breath of someone they trusted. "I was afraid this would end in chaos," she said softly. Orion traced his fingers along her knuckles. It still might. But chaos isn't the enemy. Silence was. From the balcony, they could see the memory pavilion being expanded. Citizens had begun submitting their own recollections to the archive. Not just ancient memories, but new ones. First hugs, first songs, first arguments they had not walked away from. Every moment, no matter how small, became part of the living record. Solarivan joined them on the balcony, her tablet glowing with data. "Reports say more than 70% of the population have either reduced or removed their inhibitors," she said. "Even the most conservative sectors are opening emotional mediation centers." "Any resistance?" Elissa asked. "Small groups, mostly internal, but nothing coordinated. The people are choosing, and that choice is louder than fear." That night, a celebration was held in the central plaza. Not a formal event. There were no official schedules, no rehearsed lines. People simply gathered. Musicians played tunes they had only recently remembered. Dancers improvised. Families sat on stone benches, sharing food stories and moments. Orion stood near a flame sculpture, watching it shift with the emotion levels around it. He marveled at how it danced differently as laughter rippled through the crowd. Karn approached with two steaming cups. Still trying to understand how fire knows when we're happy, he asked. It's a mystery, Orion replied. I like it that way. They clinked cups. It was a simple gesture, but meaningful. Elisa joined them shortly after. Her face was relaxed, her steps slow. She carried a lantern in one hand. This one is mine, she said, holding it up. I'll release it tonight. What does it say? Orion asked. She unfolded the small note inside. I forgive the part of me that feared feeling. They walked together to the edge of the plaza, where dozens of others stood with lanterns. One by one, the lights rose into the night sky, forming soft constellations of color. Celeraven joined them, holding her own lantern. She leaned into Karn and whispered, Do you think she knows what this means to everyone? She doesn't need to know, Karn replied. She just needs to keep choosing it. As the lanterns floated upward, Alyssa closed her eyes and whispered a word into the wind. Begin. That single word carried not through volume, but through presence. And far beyond the planet aboard stations and vessels orbiting Caelis Aether, beings of other worlds began to take notice. Something had changed. A planet once defined by silence had become a signal, not a warning, a welcome. The signal from Caelis Aether did not stop at planetary borders. It traveled quietly through relay satellites, pulsed across trade beacons, and drifted into the diplomatic webs of distant civilizations. At first it was just a curiosity, a former stronghold of emotional suppression, suddenly transmitting songs and shared memories. Odd but harmless. But the signal continued. It carried not declarations, not demands, but stories. Laughter, cries. One kiss replayed more times than anyone had anticipated. The galaxy watched, and then it responded. The first delegation arrived from the Azuran Concord. Their emissary Virai was known for his emotional resonance field, a trait that once made Elisari officials avoid him entirely. This time he was invited to land in the heart of Caelis's capital. Elyssa'tar met him herself at the steps of the Sentient Center. She wore no crown, only a simple robe, with a single silver thread, her symbol of continuity. Virai approached, hands folded. You have done something remarkable. We have done something overdue, she replied. Nearby, Orion watched the exchange, arms crossed and brow raised. Did anyone expect interstellar diplomacy to start with a kiss? Celarivan, standing at his side, smirked. Of course not. That's why it worked. Other delegations followed. Kirill, who spoke through harmonic light pulses, came to experience the newly opened memory pavilion. The humans from Earth arrived in modest attire, bringing books, instruments, and tea. What surprised them all was the openness. No Elixir guards, no scanning barriers. Only conversations. Inside the pavilion, a child named Thari played an improvised melody on a traditional Elixir flute, an instrument once kept silent by regulation. The sound was unsteady, beautiful in its lack of precision. Alyssa, seated among the delegates, nodded to the child. That note, she said, would once have been considered a malfunction. And now Virai asked. Now it is considered joy. Outside the chamber, Karn walked with a delegate from the Tyranny Pact. Their conversation was simple. Tyranny asked, Do you regret the role you once played? Karn looked up at the sky, where the sentience beacons now pulsed with gentle light. I regret not feeling it, he said, but I do not regret coming back. In the evening, Elisa and Orion walked along the garden terrace, where vines had begun to grow without pattern. No one trimmed them anymore. No one stopped the flowers from blooming crooked. They're out of order, Alyssa noted. Perfect, Orion replied. She turned to him. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if I had ignored the elixir. If I had stayed the way I was. You would still be beautiful, he said, but you wouldn't be you. They stood beneath a memory tree, its blossoms glowing pale blue. Elisa reached up and touched a petal. It responded, lighting brighter at her contact. I used to think silence meant peace, she said, but peace without feeling is only absence. He nodded. Now you know better. Yes, and now I feel everything. A pause, a breath. She leaned in and kissed him again. No counsel, no cameras, just her choice. Later that night, Karn gathered with others in the reflection circle at the Sentient Center. Instead of speeches, each person placed a small object into the central basin, a memento, a symbol, a memory. When his turn came, Karn stepped forward and placed a worn data crystal into the water. It held his sister's voice, her final recording before the purge. Her laughter had been recovered and restored. Salarivan touched his arm gently. "You gave it back to her." "I gave it back to myself," he said. Outside, the citizens of Caelis Aether held lanterns again. This time they were not sending grief, they were sending gratitude. Each lantern carried a phrase chosen by its creator. Some messages were poetic, some simple things. Orion released one with the words, "We are better now." Elyssa's lantern said, "Let feeling guide us forward." The sky filled with soft lights floating into the dark like questions answered by courage. As the crowd dispersed, a final beacon activated at the highest point of the city. It sent out no orders. Only one steady signal, a message received by anyone who chose to listen: "We are alive." And across the stars, other worlds listened. Some smiled, some wept, some for the first time began to feel. At dawn, the city of Caelis Aether awoke to birdsong. Not a simulation, not a sound file. Real birds, once considered too unpredictable for the capital, now nested openly in the garden towers. Their calls were uneven and spontaneous. No one adjusted their pitch. No one filtered the volume. Elyssa'tar stood at the balcony of the Sentient Center watching the horizon glow. The sky was a soft wash of amber and silver. She wore a loose robe that moved gently in the breeze. For the first time in years, she had slept without neural regulators. And she had dreamed. Orion joined her with 2 mugs of brewed leaf infusion, a practice now spreading from Earth's delegation. He handed her a mug and leaned against the railing beside her. "Sleep well?" he asked. "I dreamed I was a child again," she replied, "running across the orchard fields. My feet were bare. There were no watchers. Did you fall?" "I did." And I laughed. He smiled and took a sip. "That sounds like a proper dream." Elyssa turned to face him. "We have written something new here. It is not perfect. There will be pain, disagreements, maybe even chaos, but it belongs to us." Orion nodded. The messy, beautiful ownership of choice. By midday, the Sentient Center welcomed its first interspecies cohort. Artists, philosophers, and historians arrived not as visitors, but as collaborators. They brought instruments, ancient symbols, and stories still unfinished. Elixir citizens responded with their own fragments, once buried, now spoken aloud. In the pavilion, a young girl named Lyra presented her first poem. "I do not know all the names of what I feel," she said, "but I like the way they move in me." The room applauded. Some cried. Some simply sat still, holding the feeling like a fragile glass. Karn stood at the back, his arms folded. He did not speak. He only listened. And when it was over, he stepped outside to sit beneath the same memory tree where his sister once played. Celer even joined him with 2 small cups of spice broth. "Are you going to say anything?" she asked. "Maybe tomorrow. I'll hold you to it." The children played nearby, their laughter echoing through the garden. No one stopped them. No one warned them to quiet down. The noise was life. In the late afternoon, Elissa gathered with the council. The new council was not structured by lineage or title. It was drawn from sectors, crafts, and communities. Some wore ceremonial robes. Others wore stained tunics from their workshops. "There will be challenges," Elissa told them. "Some who long for the silence. Some who fear what we've become. But we must never return to what we were. Because what we were could not love. And love is what has brought us here." Later, she and Orion returned to the steps where they had first met. The plaza stretched before them, filled with new growth. Vines climbed old walls. Music floated from nearby windows. She looked at him and asked, "Are you ready to stay? I never wanted to leave," he said. They sat together as the sun dipped low. And when night arrived, Caelis Aether did not dim. It glowed. Across the city, soft lanterns lit windows. Memory trees pulsed with quiet joy. Voices rose, not in protest, not in panic, but in harmony. In the orbiting stations, watchers from other worlds sent silent messages back home. Reports filled with phrases like transformation in real time, the kiss that rewrote a planet, and Caelis is no longer cold. In the depths of the archive, a new entry was recorded. Title: "The Day We Chose to Feel." author all of us, status in progress. Alyssa closed her eyes, letting the night wrap around her. Her hand remained in Orion's. Their breath synced not by design, but by closeness. And in that closeness, the story continued. The stars did not blink. They watched. And somewhere far from Caelis, another hand reached toward a heart it had not touched in generations. The ripple had begun. The story of Caelis Aether is not one of sudden transformation, but of gradual awakening. What began as an accidental exposure to a single emotion grew into a collective remembering, a forgotten melody, a language buried beneath control, and above all, a longing that had waited in silence for someone brave enough to speak it aloud. Elyssa'tar, once the perfect heir to a doctrine of stillness, became the first to feel not because she was chosen, but because she chose herself. Orion Vale, the outsider, with unfiltered laughter and inconvenient empathy, became not just a partner, but a mirror. Together they held up a truth no system could ignore. Karn, forged by law, in loyalty, found his way back to something he thought was lost. And Salarivan, ever the strategist, helped shape a new structure, not of perfection, but of participation. Across the world, citizens who once whispered in the dark began to speak clearly, to touch, to cry, to sing, not because they were told to, but because they wanted to. In the end, it was never about a kiss. It was about what came after. A flicker of risk. A decision to open the door knowing full well what pain and beauty might come through. And in that decision, a planet rediscovered its heartbeat. So wherever you are, however you feel, let this be a reminder. Emotion is not a flaw. It is proof you are still becoming. And that perhaps is the most powerful story of all.